Saving America one entrepreneur at a time, it's the Biz Wrap Podcast with your host, Michael Manahan. The show that celebrates small business and entrepreneurs, it's Biz Wrap Radio with your host, small businessman, educator, and author, Michael Manahan. And welcome to Biz Wrap Radio. It's your host, Michael Manahan, and I'm here helping small businesses and entrepreneurs. And hey, you know, something that's getting a lot of talk these days is crowdfunding. You know, it's become increasingly difficult for us as small business people, and I'm in that boat too, I'm a small business person, to really get the capital we need to run and operate our businesses and the money we need for growth and expansion. I mean, the banks, they don't want to really lend money to small businesses unless you already have a lot of money. And Wall Street, they're busy raising money for big corporations. They don't really want to fool around with companies that need small amounts of money. So the opportunity for small businesses to really get the money they need, it's become increasingly restricted, but there is hope on the horizon, and that hope is called crowdfunding. The government passed a new legislation on the Jobs Act, which has allowed this crowdfunding to come into place, but I'm not an expert on it. I know a little bit about it, but I am so lucky to have somebody who is an expert on it. His company is all about crowdfunding. They have a website. They have the platform that you can use for crowdfunding. They actually, the gentleman I'm going to introduce in just a moment has actually written a book on crowdfunding, and he runs around the country putting on seminars telling people what this crowdfunding is all about. So I'm very, very happy to welcome to the show Mr. Scott Purcell. Well, thank you for taking the time to join us. Really appreciate it. Everybody's talking about this crowdfunding, but tell me a little bit about your business and exactly what you do.
Well, my main business, Fund America, is all about providing the software and the compliance services for people who are creating crowdfunding portals. So the people who are actually out there helping small businesses raise capital, working with investors to help get businesses funded and produce returns, those are our customers, and we're all about really powering this new industry from an infrastructure level so that other people can really get out there and help the explosion and the democratization of capital happen so businesses can get funded and jobs can get created.
Yeah, now that you bring up a good point when you say that you're kind of creating the platform. There's a misconception out there. I've talked to a number of people who think, oh, this crowdfunding is great. What that means is all I need to do is gather some sort of crowd and start getting them to give me money. But it's not as simple as that. You can't just go out to the bar on a Friday night and say, hey guys, I'm starting a business. Everybody give me $20. It doesn't work that way, right?
Well, no, sure you can do that, unless you're going to give them stock or debt. Then you're going to go to jail. But if they're just going to give you money, then sure, why not? But good luck. Good luck with that. People want to participate in the company. If they're going to give you money, then they want a shot at the upside. If you're going to wind up with a large success on your hands, then obviously the people who help fund you are going to want to participate in the success at some level. To do that, you have to give them stock or debt, some kind of convertible debt or whatever, in your company. And to do that, that is subject to the Securities Act of 1933. It's regulated by the Securities Exchange Commission and by FINRA, and is subject to a lot of federal and state securities laws.
And your platform maneuvers and manages all of that so somebody can actually raise the capital they're looking for, give stock or sell stock, if you will, to individual investors in relatively small dollar amounts, and do it in compliance with all of the rules and regulations that you have to comply with if you're going to be selling securities.
Exactly, and that's what we're all about. We're all about providing the software but also providing the compliance services so that brokers and other people who are going to have what's called a funding portal for either a 506C, which is securities offerings raising money just from accredited investors, in other words, crowdfunding for rich people, which is legal now, or in the future, early next year, crowdfunding for everybody, so anybody can help fund a company. That's called 4A6 or Title III of the Jobs Act, not allowed yet, but will be soon. There's an awful lot of work that goes into knowing what's legal and what's not. There's a lot of landmines. That's just the regulatory, that's our government. But there are ways to navigate it, and we want to help those people who are going to be helping people navigate it. So we train the trainer.
Okay, I'm pretty sure I got it. We're talking, if you're just joining us, we're talking with Scott Purcell of Fund America, and he is a crowdfunding expert, not an export, he's an expert. His company has developed a platform that is needed, the support and kind of back-end platform that's needed in order to make crowdfunding actually happen. Now, when you mentioned that that the 4A6 rules, which will apply to the non-accredited investors. That means, for those who don't understand the term accredited investor, really that means, as I think you kind of said, rich people who have either large incomes or a large asset base. But the whole crowdfunding idea is really to allow the average Joe to put up whatever it might be, a small amount of money, and get in on these new technology or these new startup companies. When the rules actually do go into place and people can start crowdfunding, what do you think is going to be kind of the amount that an individual could invest in a particular deal?
The government, in its infinite wisdom, has decided that it's okay for you to gamble or buy lottery tickets with all the money you have, but you are not allowed to do that when you're helping your local friend or business get started. So they've put restrictions on how much you can invest in a year, and that means anywhere from $2,000 up to $100,000, and that is based on your income or net worth. If you have income or net worth less than $100,000, the number is 5%. So if you make $100,000, you could invest $5,000 a year in crowdfunding projects. If you make more than that, you can invest 10% of your income or net worth up to a maximum of $100,000. Generally, though, the amounts most people are going to be able to invest per year are, call it $2,000 to $5,000.
Okay, because the average household income here in the United States is somewhere in the neighborhood of around $50,000. So, but there's no reason that somebody who makes $50,000 or $75,000 shouldn't be able to get in on these deals. You know what? One of the big complaints about Wall Street is we have companies like Facebook and these other social media companies and internet companies that everybody is a customer of, everybody's participating in, but the only people who got to ride the wave of profits from those companies was the fat cats on Wall Street. Some select investment funds and all the rich guys, back in New York, and the average Joe who says, hey, I wouldn't mind buying a couple of shares of Google or a couple of shares of Facebook. No, you couldn't do that. You're X'd out of the deal.
Right. Exactly.
So now what's really going to happen is the small person or small investor, they're not necessarily small people, but they're small investors, is going to be able to put a couple of grand into a startup, and even better, he's got the opportunity to maybe even put it into a startup or a business of somebody that he personally knows or has an association with.
That's exactly right. That's why we call this the democratization of capital. It's the ability for anybody to help fund a business and to take a shot at the upside. So the people that have had 80 years of a near monopoly they get all the money and all the great deals, or the bad deals, they get to take the risk, but they also get the rewards. The regular person has not had that option. And now we're now they're going to have that, so they can take a shot in investing in the next Facebook or the next Google, or they can also take a shot in putting money into their doctor's office or their dentist's office that wants to franchise and wants to expand and grow. And maybe it's not the next Facebook, but it's going to be a really nice return, and they're going to have a great time helping somebody that they know. But legally, you couldn't do that before. Now you're going to be able to.
This is kind of almost going back full circle to perhaps what happened maybe 100 or 150 years ago. I mean, back in the old days, somebody wanted to start a business, and they would go around and get their brother-in-law and their cousin and people maybe from their church and in their neighborhood to put money into the business, and the business would get launched. So it's kind of almost going back to perhaps what we did years ago.
That's exactly right. I mean, you're a professor of finance. You know the history extremely well. That's what created the Industrial Revolution in this country.
Hey, Scott. Hey, Scott.
Then go ahead.
Sorry to interrupt you. We're coming up on a hard break here. We've got a commercial break. Can you stick over for the next segment?
Sure thing.
Okay, absolutely. Here, it's BizRap Radio. Your host, Mike Manahan. We'll be right back after these words with Scott Purcell from Fund America. And we're back with BizRap Radio. It's your host, Michael Manahan. Thank you so much for joining us today. We are talking about crowdfunding and how you, as a small business person or an entrepreneur, can get the capital that you need to run and or expand your business. And we've got the expert on crowdfunding right here on the radio. It is Scott Purcell from Fund America. Scott, thanks for hanging with us for another segment.
Absolutely. Happy to be here.
So, Scott, it's this whole crowdfunding thing is not just one big package that's already been passed and it's ready to go. There's parts that we can use right now. There's parts that we're going to have to wait a little bit longer until, I guess, the government. Why is it taking the government so long to finalize all this stuff? I mean, is it really that difficult?
You're asking why it takes a while for our government to do something? The good news is the Jobs Act was passed very quickly. President Obama signed it into law on April 5th of 2012. We were supposed to have Title II crowdfunding for rich people by July of that year, 2012, not 13 or 14. And we're supposed to have Title III crowdfunding for everybody by December of that year. And currently, the way we sit right now is Title II, now known as the 506C exemption of Regulation D of the Securities Act of 1933, is, as of September of 2013, is now legal. So businesses can raise money online with this Title II, which means that they can advertise. They can tell people they need money. Previously, that doesn't sound like a big deal, but it is because that was illegal before. For the last 80 years, if you're a business owner that needed cash, you were not allowed to tell anyone unless you had a pre-existing relationship with them, which made it almost impossible for a small business to get financed.
That always it just kind of hit me as being what a weird, strange thing. You need to raise money for your business, but you can't talk to anybody about it if you don't already know them.
Right, exactly.
If the people I know had the money to invest in my business, I probably wouldn't need to do a big offering document anyways. I'd just say, hey, why don't you buy some stock in my company?
Exactly, but that rule was passed at the height of the Great Depression, and so it was done. It was created in a time of fear and panic, and like a lot of government regulation, once it existed, it couldn't be changed. So it literally took 80 years to change that rule.
That's incredible. But now you can. So if a company wanted to raise some money today, they could actually do one of these 506C offerings. They put together some kind of an offering document. They can market it over the internet, and they can advertise it. Could they advertise it on radio? Could somebody advertise it on my radio show?
Absolutely.
So we could do one little 1-minute commercial.
We're trying to raise money for our business. Help us out, please.
And then the only restriction is that the people who do invest in that 506C would have to be, as we call, rich people or accredited investors.
They have to earn over $200,000 a year in income or have over $1 million in assets, not including their house.
Well, here in California, that's not hard to come by. I mean, a couple $100,000 a year. There's police officers and city clerks making a couple of $100,000 a year in California. Maybe in Alabama that might be hard to come by, but here in California, my God! Now in the Silicon Valley, just reading in the paper this morning, the average price up in the San Francisco area is now almost hit $1 million for the average house.
Absolutely amazing.
It's incredible. So but let's say somebody actually wants to do this. Your company is Fund America, but somebody listening who wants to raise some money can't deal directly with Fund America. Is that correct?
No, but if they reach out to us, we'll steer them to somebody who can help them. And we have a lot of people around the country who are creating their own funding portals that help people raise money through the internet or whatever, or through securities brokers. And some are very general and some are niche focused, like real estate or helping veteran-owned businesses or helping women-owned businesses or, different things like that. So we're happy to steer people in the right direction.
Okay, so you'll take a look at what their particular business is, what they're trying to raise money for. You'll look at the people who you're partnering with, who are using your platform, and say, well, here's the guy you should talk to. This is Bob, or he's a real estate expert, or here's Joe, he's consumer products, or something like that.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Now, hey, can BizRap Radio start its own fundraising portal? Is that something that we could do?
You could, sure. There's no reason why you couldn't do that.
And what would I have to do? Do I need to have a securities license to do that? I don't have a securities license.
The actual transactions have to go through a broker-dealer, which we own a broker-dealer. So somebody like BizRap Radio would be what we call a marketplace, and you could have your own funding platform. You can't call it a portal because that's a regulatory word, but it's really a way of advertising and helping people and providing other services, maybe providing consulting or mentoring or other kinds, advertising, helping get the word out, helping create some momentum and inertia, or getting over inertia for a company. We give you the ability to do that, and then it's all under your brand, all under your look and feel. But then the actual transaction, when somebody actually invests in something, that goes through the broker-dealer, so it's in compliance with federal and state securities regulations.
Wow. Yeah. And what do you think is this something that's really complex, or like a kind of an old simpleton like me? Could I manage to figure out how to put together one of these platforms?
Yeah, you could figure it out. It is a business in itself. So it like anything else, if it's a venture you're going to undertake, you have to put time and energy into it, but it's not overly expensive. And especially if your mission is to help businesses, then it's actually a really cool thing to do. And that's a lot of the real estate companies, a lot of the niche, like the guys who are helping veteran-owned businesses, that's what they're doing. Well, they don't want to be brokers.
That's something that we're going to have to talk about because, one of the sponsors of our show is MatchVest Capital, which, by the way, is my consulting company. But I try and keep this show. It's not a big advertisement for my consulting business and things I'm involved in. Really, the idea of this show, it really is a content show that is designed to help small businesses and entrepreneurs and, whatever that might be. But that's something you and I need to discuss because I'm sure that a lot of people listening to this show are saying, well, okay, hey, this sounds great, but I want to get in on this, and maybe I can help them do that outside of the context of the show. So that's wonderful. So
just go to fundamerica.com and you'll see a lot of information on how to have your own platform and what we can do for you.
Okay. Well, again, we're talking to Scott Purcell of Fund America, fundamerica.com. Scott is one of the preeminent crowdfunding experts here in the U.S. He's written a book on it. He's putting on seminars on crowdfunding. And I understand, Scott, that you've actually been advising the Securities and Exchange Commission on certain things to do with crowdfunding. Is that correct?
Yeah, a lot of the industry response, which I'm on the board of, I have authored everything from the best practices for funding portals for the regulators to many industry letters regarding the various proposed rules. It's kind of neat when you see the final rules. and you read them and go, hey, I wrote that. I wrote that part of the rule that the SEC has then published.
Hey, well, maybe we can get you in there as the next head of the SEC. How does that sound?
Yeah, I don't think so. No, thanks. Government's not for me. I like private sector. I like just being an entrepreneur and helping other entrepreneurs.
Well, that's yeah, and so do I. It's just fabulous. So, I'm really hoping. I keep reading. The head of the Fed, Yellen, was talking the other day about how she wants to set monetary policy so that it helps create more jobs. But, really at the end of the day, it's entrepreneurs that create jobs. Small businesses create jobs. And if we could just get them more capital, they'd create a whole lot more jobs. Am I wrong about that?
That's a fact. 65% of all new jobs created in this country are from businesses with less than a couple hundred employees. And the main reason for failure, people are like, oh, small businesses fail. Well, the number 2 reason for failure is not lack of sales. That's number 10. It's because they don't have the money that they need.
Yeah, and this is something that people just don't get. You need capital to run a business, and actually the more successful the business is, the more capital you need. This is something I talk about in my college classes on entrepreneurial finance. If you've got a runaway success of a business, you can actually be crippled because of the lack of capital to fund and fuel that growth. It takes money to grow.
Imagine if you're a commercial bakery and you get some great contracts. Well, you need space, you need employees, you need new ovens, you need things that cost money. You have a really good business on your hands, but you need some money in order to fill the contracts and make it happen. And if you don't get that money, you don't get to do that business. You don't get to hire. You don't get to do the things that generate jobs and create this economic engine that we have.
Well, look, we're coming to the end of this segment, Scott. I really appreciate you staying with us for this time. It's Scott Purcell, Fund America. Check it out. Scott, thank you so much, and you have yourself a fabulous day. And it's Biz Rap Radio. Your host, Michael Manahan. We'll be back right after these messages. Welcome back to Biz Rap Radio. I'm your host, Michael Manahan, and thanks for staying with us. And if you've just joined us, thank you for joining us. This is the show all about small business and entrepreneurs. And we're doing our weekly segment with the market monk, David Frazier. David, welcome back to the show.
Hello, Mike. Thanks for having me again. Glad to be here.
David, David is a person who tracks and is kind of an expert on the big picture things, what's going on in the stock market, what's going on in the economy. And I'm reading a lot the last couple of weeks about Janet Yellen, who's head of the Federal Reserve. And, of course, the government's busy. The Federal Reserve, at least, is busy trying to control what goes on in the economy. But one of the things she focused on was she made some comment that one of her top priorities was creating jobs. And it just seemed to me that, I don't know, maybe I don't know enough about this stuff, but I'm not quite sure how the Federal Reserve can create jobs. I mean, isn't it like businesses that create jobs? Well, how do you take what she's saying?
Well, here's what she's really saying. And let me say this to begin with. Janet Yellen and her predecessor, Ben Bernanke, these are smart people. They really are very smart, very knowledgeable people. A lot of the other persons who are often members of the Fed have not convinced me in any way that they're terribly smart. But the chairmen of the Fed usually tend to be pretty smart people and usually know what they're talking about. And I say that because these guys take a lot of criticism. And, they have very big jobs to do. And a lot of the criticism actually is unfounded. It just is. But anyway, to get specifically to answer your question, well, she and the Federal Reserve, they can't create any jobs. Yeah, of course they can't. And she knows that. But I will say this before getting into this more. The Fed, however, can do things up to a certain limit to stimulate the economy, the overall economy. That is to get businesses, households, businesses and households, investing again, and I don't mean investing in the financial markets. If you're a business, investing in your product inventories, expanding your operations, or if you're an individual, maybe buying a home, for example, they can do things to stimulate investments in what are referred to these real assets by increasing the money supply and lowering lending rates. And generally speaking, as a result of doing those things, we often do see improvements in the employment market and hiring increase. So there are things that the Fed can do to stimulate, to some degree, indirectly, the employment market, but can they create jobs directly? Well, of course not. And I don't want to get too long-winded here. I don't want to bore your audience. But one other thing I'll say quickly is they've already done everything that they can do, in my opinion. We can get into that more if you'd like.
So what we're really...
There's nothing, they can't do anything else more. They've done what they can to stimulate the employment market.
Okay, so what she's really saying is she's saying through the strategies of the Federal Reserve in expanding the money supply and keeping interest rates low, they can stimulate the business economy or the business sector, if you will, and the business sector through that stimulation will expand, and of course an expansion of the business sector then creates jobs. But why then, the Fed's been stimulating the economy for quite some time now through this entire recession, but we still are not seeing super robust job growth. I mean, I know that the statistics have come down a little bit. We have less people unemployed, but we also have this huge group of people who've literally just dropped off the face of the earth, who aren't counted anymore. This group that we don't call them unemployed because they've literally dropped out of the job force and stopped looking for work, and that is bigger than ever. And if you added those people in, our true unemployment rates are really atrocious. So why are we not seeing a much more robust recovery in the business sector?
The reason being is, and by the way, before I answer that question, I'd like to just add to what you just said briefly, and that is, you're correct as far as your comments on overall employment and the way that the Federal Reserve and other government agencies tend to measure employment. The fact of the matter is, the actual, what I would call the real amount of employment or unemployment. Yeah, we've had improvements, but they have not been huge improvements. They've been modest. And so to answer your question, why hasn't what the Fed has done with this massive increase of the money supply, why has it not been more stimulative in creating in stimulating businesses to increase their workforces? And the reason being, actually, I would argue that is really quite simple, is because we're coming out of a situation that is similar in a lot of ways, not nearly as bad, but still similar in many ways to the Great Depression of the 1930s. And when you see when one's had such a big downturn in the overall economy, well, think about it. Think about it. Just what you've done or what persons that you know have done, whether it's be your family members, friends, or businesses. When you experience such a big downturn, do you really care what the rate of interest is that is available for you to borrow money? And yeah, of course you care to some degree, but my point is, I don't care if interest rates are zero. If you can borrow money at no interest, the good chance is that you're still not going to go out and borrow a lot of money.
Yeah, because it's not just about borrowing money. By the way, if you're just joining us, we're talking to David Fraser, the Market Monk, a regular contributor to BizRap Radio. But yeah, it's because just borrowing money, there's an inherent risk in borrowing money, even if the interest rate is zero, the risk of borrowing money is you have to pay it back. You've entered into a contractual obligation, and at some point in time, somebody's going to come knocking on your door wanting that money paid back. So if you're a business, you need to be sure that you can generate revenues and profits to make the debt service payments. Or if you're an individual, you need to make sure that you're going to be able to generate a big enough paycheck to pay back that debt. And it would appear then what businesses and individuals are saying is they're not certain that they're going to be able to generate the cash flow to pay back that debt, even if the interest rate is zero.
Exactly. I couldn't have said it better. Let's say, for another words, that you're an individual or a family member that lives in a home and you have a mortgage on that home. You're what is referred to as a homeowner. I would argue you're only a homeowner if you don't have any debt on the home. But if you have a home and you have a mortgage on it, well, guess what? If you bought that home anytime from 2005 to 2005 to late 2007, the current market value of your home, the resale price of your home, is less than what you paid for it.
Right.
Are you going to now take out another mortgage to buy a second home? Or are you going to take out a home equity loan? You're not in a position to do so. So it doesn't matter exactly what you said. So, yeah, you've got it exactly right. And that's why the Fed directions have not stimulated the overall economy more so, and why we haven't seen any substantial job growth. You got it. All I can do is just be redundant. And you said it perfectly.
So given that scenario, and David, we're actually coming up on the end of our segment. We got about a minute left here, but given that scenario, why the other things that stand in the way of job growth are regulation, taxation, all of the rules and policies that you have to go through in order to just start a business and expand a business. Why wouldn't the government loosen up on some of those to try and stimulate business activity?
Well, I think you probably know the answer. I think your audience knows the answer. And it's a very, very unfortunate. Really, we're going to rely on these clowns in Congress to actually do something? These country club members who there, many of them for a lifetime, they consider it, quote, a career. That's not what the Constitution, the founding of this country was meant to do as far as Congress. Well, it's not supposed to be a career. It's not supposed to be a country club. These guys...
Okay, David, I agree with you. I've got to cut you off because we're at the end of our segment. And we're back with BizRap Radio. I'm your host, Michael Manahan. This is the show all about entrepreneurs and small business. If you're just joining the show and you missed our last couple of segments, we had Scott Purcell of Fund America on talking about crowdfunding, and then we had David Fraser, the market monk, on talking about the Federal Reserve and what they're doing and how the Federal Reserve thinks it can create jobs. But really, we all know that entrepreneurs and business people create jobs. People like you and me out there creating the jobs that move the economy forward. Let's do a little segment on Mailbox. I got some interesting emails and communications from some of our listeners. Debbie in Riverside said she loved the segment for last week on Darlene and Chase Bank closing those bank accounts, and she said it was really nice to hear from women entrepreneurs, and I definitely agree. We need more women entrepreneurs. I hope a lot of women entrepreneurs are listening to this show. From Jose in San Bernardino, Jose says, Mike, great show. Really enjoy listening to you. Thanks, Jose. I appreciate you being part of the audience. And from Dawn in Orange County, Dawn says, I'd really like some ideas on how I can create more business. Can you do a show about that? Well, in fact, next week, I'm excited to say we've got a renowned speaker coming on the show. His name is Scott Sorrell, and you won't want to miss that. He is a sales trainer, and he's got literally dozens of ideas on how you can improve your business. So let's go a little bit about back to our topic of government regulation and how we are being over-regulated. reading this on the internet, that the city of Philadelphia now requires all bloggers to purchase a $300 business license. Can you believe that? If you want to start a little internet blog and you are living in Philadelphia, it's going to cost you $300. The city even went after one poor woman who has earned $11 from her blog over the past 2 years and forced her to pay $300 for a business license. Now, if that is not absolutely ridiculous, I don't know what is. You know, one of the things we forget about or just seems to get lost somewhere is the cost of compliance. Of all the rules and regulations, but let's just talk about one. Let's just talk about income taxes. Do you know Americans spend about 7.6 billion hours each year doing their taxes? Yes, 7.6 billion hours. Now, how many roads, bridges, dams, skyscrapers? Imagine what we could build with 7.6 billion hours of labor. But no, we spend 7.6 billion hours filling out paperwork for the IRS. And to make matters worse, the rules and regulations from the IRS are so complicated that we actually end up hiring over 1 million accountants every year to do our tax returns, and we spend close to $30 billion a year preparing our tax returns. Can you just, I mean, that is so hugely wasteful as to just absolutely be unbelievable. $30 billion a year just so we can file our tax returns and pay Uncle Sam. And by the way, most of that is being paid by you and me, small businesses, because most small businesses, our tax returns are a little too complicated to go down to the local H&R Block and pay $15 or $49 or whatever they charge. We need to hire a professional tax preparer. And I was just talking to a small accountant. She owns a small accounting firm. I wouldn't necessarily say she's small, but she owns a small accounting firm. Her standard fee for a small business, a dry cleaner, an auto repair shop, a UPS store, just name it, her standard cost or charge for a small business tax return is $500. Now just think about that, $500 just to prepare a relatively simple tax return for a small business. It seems ridiculous to me. Maybe it's ridiculous to you as well. Last week we started to talk about minimum wage, and I told the listening audience that I had 10 reasons why I think minimum wages are a bad idea. We talked about the first one, which is the individual freedom of workers. Minimum wages restrict the individual freedom from workers, but minimum wages also infringe on the individual freedoms of business owners. Let's face it, ours is a capitalist society. That means our economic well-being is tied to business enterprises that employ people and provide goods and services. But in order for our economic system to work, we need people to take their money and risk their capital by opening business enterprises. That's what you and me do every day. We risk our capital to open and run business enterprises. Now, you would think one of the rights we would have as business owners who put our capital at risk would be to purchase labor in the open market at the price we are willing to pay without going bankrupt. Further, small businesses employ most of the people in this country and create the most jobs. But with minimum wage, you remove the freedom of the individual business owner to purchase labor in an open market, potentially increasing the risk of bankruptcy for small business owners, and further potentially reducing the number of small business entrants into the market, thus limiting economic growth. So what we're really saying here is not only are we infringing on personal freedoms, the very fact that we have minimum wage and that it potentially is going to increase the costs of small businesses, it means we may very well have less small businesses opening. And we need small businesses. We need small businesses to open. We need them, more of them to open, because, again, most people in the United States work for small businesses, and most new jobs, as we pull out of recessions, are created by small businesses. And small businesses are typically the ones who do have, in many cases, lower wages. That's not always the case, but a lot of small businesses do have lower wages. So when you do put into effect, of course, minimum wages, you're increasing the cost basis of these various small businesses, and it just makes it that much more difficult for us as small business people to operate. So again, one of the reasons we should not have minimum wages is it really is a significant infringement upon business owners' individual freedoms. Now, of course, the government's free to pay whatever wages they want to pay, and I have no argument with that. And although I think the government can often be a little foolish with how it spends your and my money. I was going to say for a moment there how it spends its money, but really it's not the government's money. It's your money. It's my money. And I don't think it's a good thing for the government to overpay the people that work for the government. But, I guess we can at least allow the government to make a decision as to what they will pay its workers. But why we as business people can't make that same fundamental decision? Why do we not have the freedom to pay our workers what we believe we should pay them? And if the workers don't want to work for what we want to pay them, then they have a choice. There are 30 million small businesses out there. They can work for governments, nonprofits, or any one of those other businesses out there. So again, it's an infringement on the personal freedom of small businesses to force us to pay minimum wage. And I've got 8 more reasons why we shouldn't have minimum wage. We'll be talking about those in the coming weeks. I'm going to kind of give you one each week as we move along. So remember, here at BizRap Radio, we really believe we can fix the United States of America through a fundamental concept that individuals pursuing their own economic interests in free markets will create more prosperity for more people than can ever be achieved through government regulation and a planned economy. It's BizRap Radio, fixing America through individual economic freedom. I am your host, Michael Manahan. So thank you so much for joining me this week, and we will be back next week with another edition of BizRap Radio.